Your sister's wedding is off limits for you. Your weird social anxiety will embarrass the family, Dad said. This was after I had spent my meager savings to buy my dress and shoes. On the day of the wedding, I packed one bag and said my goodbyes. Mom giggled. You will never make it past the Canadian border with that life. Today marks exactly 4 years since that morning. A few hours ago, I sent them a 60-second video. 15 minutes later, the frantic calls, texts, and desperate attempts to FaceTime me began. The origins of my permanent exile from my own family started long before my younger sister Jessica even got engaged to her real estate developer boyfriend Kevin. I was born with a severe, debilitating panic disorder that primarily manifested as intense social phobia, particularly triggered by large, chaotic crowds, loud noises, and unfamiliar environments with high sensory input. While other children attended boisterous birthday parties and crowded school dances, I spent my youth confined to my bedroom, gripped by a physical terror that made my chest seize, my vision narrow, and my lungs refuse to draw air. Instead of seeking professional medical intervention or demonstrating any baseline parental empathy, my father, Martin, and my mother, Valerie, viewed my neurological condition as a deliberate insult to their upper-middle-class social standing. They were highly active members of our local suburban country club, hosting massive summer barbecues and holiday galas, and they treated my inability to participate as a severe character flaw rather than a legitimate medical crisis. They actively hid me from their friends, offering vague, dismissive excuses about me studying or feeling unwell, effectively training Jessica to view me as a defective secret to be kept out of the public eye. As I entered adulthood, I managed to carve out a highly isolated but entirely functional existence. I secured a stable position as a remote data analyst for a logistics firm, allowing me to earn a living without enduring the daily psychological torture of a crowded corporate office space. I saved every single penny I earned, living in a tiny basement apartment a few miles from my parents' house. When Jessica announced her engagement, the family immediately escalated into a frenzy of wedding planning, treating the event like a royal coronation. The guest list rapidly ballooned from 50 close relatives to 350 business associates, neighbors, and extended acquaintances from Kevin's firm. Despite the overwhelming terror the concept of a massive wedding provoked in me, I desperately wanted to support my sister. I wanted to prove to my family that I could conquer my own brain chemistry for one evening to celebrate her milestone. I spent $800, nearly 2 months of my leftover discretionary income, on a custom-fitted, understated navy blue gown and a pair of matching low-heeled shoes. I spent weeks practicing deep breathing exercises, visualizing myself sitting quietly at a back table near an exit, entirely prepared to endure the severe discomfort to show them I cared about their joy. 2 days before the ceremony, Martin and Valerie arrived unannounced at my basement apartment. They refused my offer of tea, standing rigidly by my small kitchen counter, inspecting my modest living conditions with open disdain before delivering their joint verdict. Valerie spoke first, her tone utterly devoid of any maternal warmth. Jessica has decided that having you at the venue is simply too much of a liability, she announced, adjusting the strap of her expensive leather purse. The guest list is full of very important clients from Kevin's firm. We cannot risk you having one of your little episodes and causing a scene in front of 300 people. I stood there, pointing to the protective garment bag hanging on the back of my door, explaining that I had purchased the dress, that I had a concrete plan to remain entirely out of the way, and that I simply wanted to witness the ceremony from the shadows. Martin stepped forward, shaking his head in disgust. Your sister's wedding is off limits for you. Your weird social anxiety will embarrass the family. You cannot even go to the grocery store without looking like a terrified animal. We are not letting you ruin the professional photographs or make the wealthy guests uncomfortable. You will stay here on Saturday. They walked out, leaving me standing alone with an expensive dress I would never wear. The sheer, calculated cruelty of their decision completely dismantled the fragile loyalty I still held for them. They did not want to protect me from the stress of a large crowd. They wanted to protect their manufactured public image from the reality of my existence. A profound, icy clarity settled over my mind. If my existence was truly that burdensome to them, I would permanently remove the burden. Coincidentally, I had already applied for and received approval for a skilled worker visa to relocate to Ontario, Canada. A backup plan I had initiated months prior, when the wedding planning began to feel overly hostile and demanding. I had planned to tell them after the wedding, but their preemptive banishment accelerated my timeline. On the morning of Jessica's wedding, while my parents were frantically coordinating floral deliveries at their house, I drove over and parked in their driveway. I walked into the grand foyer holding a single medium-sized travel duffel bag containing my essentials. Valerie was standing by the staircase in a silk robe, holding a clipboard full of seating charts. I informed her I was leaving the country permanently. She looked at my single bag, looked at my plain travel clothes, and let out a high, mocking laugh. "You will never make it past the Canadian border with that life," she giggled, waving her hand dismissively. "You are terrified of your own shadow. You will be back here crying in a week when you realize you cannot handle the real world without us hiding you. Do not call me today. I am too busy." I turned around, walked out the front door, got into my car, and drove directly north toward the border crossing without looking back. The drive was terrifying, my heart hammering violently against my ribs for hours as I approached the massive infrastructure of the Peace Bridge. But the fear of returning to that toxic house was vastly superior to the fear of the unknown. I handed my approved visa documents to the border agent, answered his questions with a trembling voice, and crossed into Canada entirely alone. I secured a small, quiet apartment on the outskirts of Toronto, kept my remote job, set up my computers, and settled into my new life. I began the agonizingly slow, difficult process of actually treating my condition instead of simply hiding from it. The absolute silence from my family over the next several months confirmed everything I'd known. They simply did not care. With my new comprehensive health coverage, I began attending intense, highly structured cognitive behavioral therapy sessions twice a week with Dr. Eris Mercer, a specialist in severe anxiety disorders located in a medical building near my new neighborhood. For the first year, simply navigating the public transit system to reach his office felt like climbing a mountain, but Dr. Mercer provided me with actual clinical tools rather than judgment. He taught me how to manage the adrenaline spikes, how to ground myself during a panic attack, and how to slowly expand my tolerance for social interaction. It was within the completely silent, neutral space of Dr. Mercer's waiting room that my entire life trajectory permanently changed. The waiting area of Dr. Mercer's clinic was specifically designed for patients who required minimal sensory stimulation. There was no background music, no ticking clocks, and the lighting was kept deliberately dim to reduce visual strain. I usually arrived exactly 5 minutes before my scheduled Tuesday afternoon appointments, preferring to minimize my time in public spaces. Over the course of 6 months, I began to notice the patient whose session immediately preceded mine. His name was Simon, I later learned. He was tall, dressed entirely in plain, dark, unbranded clothing, and possessed the exact same rigid, hyper-vigilant posture that I carried. We never spoke during those initial months. We merely exchanged brief, silent nods as he exited the inner office and I entered. We recognized the shared, exhausting burden of existing in a world that felt fundamentally hostile to our nervous systems. Our first actual interaction occurred when a sudden, violent thunderstorm knocked out the power to the medical building just as Simon was leaving his session and I was arriving. The sudden darkness and the loud crash of thunder triggered an immediate panic response in both of us. We ended up sitting on the floor of the hallway together, our backs against the wall, trapped in the dark while waiting for the emergency generators to engage. Simon spoke first, his voice remarkably calm despite the visible tremor in his hands. He asked me if I needed him to count backwards from 10, a standard grounding technique we both clearly knew. I told him I preferred naming capital cities. We sat in the dark for 20 minutes, quietly trading geography facts until the lights flickered back on. That shared vulnerability formed a foundation of absolute trust. We began scheduling our appointments to intentionally overlap in the waiting room, extending our brief greetings into actual conversations. Simon completely understood the precise mechanics of my fear without needing any explanation. He never pressured me to go to crowded coffee shops or noisy restaurants. Our early dates consisted of walking through quiet botanical gardens on Tuesday mornings when the crowds were non-existent, cooking meals together in my small apartment, and sitting in total silence reading books on opposite ends of a sofa. It was the most profound, deeply comforting intimacy I had ever experienced. 3 months into our relationship, as we were sitting on a park bench watching the snow fall over Lake Ontario, Simon explained exactly why he suffered from such severe social phobia. His full name was Simon McLeod. He was the only son and direct heir of Duncan McLeod, the founder of a massive Canadian industrial conglomerate specializing in global timber and commercial real estate logistics. From the moment he was born, Simon was thrust into a hyper-visible, intensely scrutinized lifestyle. He was expected to attend massive corporate galas, deliver speeches to hundreds of investors, and navigate rooms filled with predatory business associates. The relentless pressure and the constant, suffocating crowds completely broke his nervous system by his 25th birthday. Unable to cope with the sheer volume of social expectation, he legally transferred his active voting rights to a proxy board, stepped away from all public-facing corporate duties, and retreated into a completely private life to seek psychiatric help. His father, Duncan, unlike my parents, actually understood the severity of the medical condition and fully supported his withdrawal from the spotlight, ensuring Simon retained his massive financial equity without the burden of public performance. Simon possessed a personal net worth that defied normal comprehension, yet he drove a standard sedan, wore plain sweaters, and sought comfort in the exact same quiet isolation that I did. The revelation of his extreme wealth did not alter our dynamic because the money was entirely irrelevant to the core of our connection. We were two people who had found safety in each other after spending our entire lives feeling fundamentally unsafe in the world. Our relationship progressed with a steady, unbreakable certainty. We moved into a sprawling, heavily secured, and deeply secluded estate surrounded by 40 acres of private forest just outside Caledon, a sanctuary completely shielded from the public eye. 2 years after I crossed the border, Simon and I got married. We invited exactly 20 people to the ceremony. It was a stark, intentional contrast to the chaotic, 300-person spectacle my family had demanded for my sister. Simon's father, Duncan, stood by the altar, offering a warm, grounding presence entirely unlike my own father's hostility. The guest list consisted of Duncan, a handful of Simon's trusted proxy board members who understood his boundaries, 3 of my remote coworkers who had become close friends over the years, and Dr. Mercer. There were no flashing cameras, no overwhelming floral centerpieces designed to trigger allergies, and no pressure to perform for an audience. It was simply a gathering of safe individuals celebrating our union in a quiet, sunlit room overlooking the forest. I wore the simple navy blue dress I had originally purchased for Jessica's wedding, finally putting the garment to use in a room filled only with genuine love and total acceptance. Duncan welcomed me into his family with tears in his eyes, thanking me for bringing so much peace into his son's life. The following year, I gave birth to our daughter, Sophie. She arrived in a quiet, private hospital wing, entirely protected from the chaotic family dynamics I had endured in my own childhood. We built a life entirely on our own terms, funding massive philanthropic projects anonymously, managing our investments from the total privacy of our home office, and raising our daughter in an environment defined by patience, understanding, and absolute security. I continued my therapy, expanding my boundaries at my own pace, eventually reaching a point where I could comfortably take Sophie to quiet local parks or small neighborhood markets without experiencing a severe panic response. I had successfully constructed the exact life my mother swore I would never achieve. As the calendar slowly turned toward the exact 4-year anniversary of the day I left my parents' house, I found myself standing by the massive bay windows of our living room. Watching Simon run across the lawn with Sophie sitting on his shoulders, both of them laughing loudly in the crisp autumn air, I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I had not spoken a single word to Martin, Valerie, or Jessica in 48 months. I did not possess any desire to re-enter their toxic orbit, nor did I want an apology. I simply wanted to deliver a final, undeniable testament to their profound failure. I opened the camera application on my phone and recorded exactly 60 seconds of footage. The video captured the sweeping, immaculate grounds of the McLeod estate, the massive stone architecture of our home in the background, and finally zoomed in on Simon, wearing a simple gray sweater, smiling brightly as he spun our daughter Sophie around in the autumn leaves. My voice was completely absent from the recording. The only audio was the sound of the wind and my family laughing in the distance. I stopped recording, opened the messaging application, and typed in the old group chat containing Martin, Valerie, and Jessica, a thread that had remained completely dormant for 4 years. I attached the video file and typed a single simple sentence beneath it. I made it past the border. I pressed send, locked the screen, and placed the device on the kitchen counter. I imagined how the sequence of events would unfold on their end. They would receive the message, likely assume I was sending a pathetic update from a tiny rental apartment, and click the video prepared to mock whatever modest life I had managed to scrape together. Instead, they would see a private estate that dwarfed their pretentious country club, a visibly happy child, and a man they did not recognize. The silence lasted exactly 15 minutes. I assumed Jessica, who possessed a deeply ingrained habit of investigating anyone she deemed a threat to her social standing, immediately took a screenshot of Simon's face from the video and ran it through a reverse image search engine online. Given his status as a major corporate shareholder, his identity and estimated net worth were entirely a matter of public financial record, despite his complete lack of social presence. The realization that the sister she had deemed too broken and embarrassing to attend a local wedding was now permanently legally tied to a Canadian industrial tycoon must have hit their living room like a physical shockwave. My phone suddenly erupted. The screen lit up with 3 back-to-back missed calls from Valerie, followed immediately by 2 calls from Martin and a barrage of rapid-fire text messages from Jessica. The texts were a masterclass in aggressive backpedaling and fabricated affection. "Claire! Oh my God! Is that your baby? We have missed you so much!" Jessica wrote. Valerie quickly followed with, "Sweetheart, please answer the phone. Your father and I have been worried sick about you for years. We need to catch up. You have to introduce us to your husband." The sheer, unadulterated hypocrisy of their sudden interest was genuinely repulsive. They had not spent a single second worrying about me while they assumed I was suffering in isolation, but the instant they smelled extreme wealth, I was suddenly a beloved family member again. I ignored the phone for another 30 minutes, allowing their panic and desperation to fully marinate before it began to vibrate with an incoming FaceTime request from Jessica. I picked up the device, walked into my quiet home office, sat down behind my heavy walnut desk, and accepted the call. The screen immediately populated with the faces of all 3 of my biological family members, crammed together on a sofa in my parents' living room. They looked visibly older, and their expressions were stretched into incredibly fake, frantic smiles. "Claire!" Valerie shrieked, pressing her hand to her chest in a theatrical display of emotion. "Look at you! You look so healthy! We were absolutely devastated when you left." I looked at them through the screen, feeling absolutely no physical anxiety, no rising panic, and no desire to seek their approval. The therapy had worked perfectly. They held absolutely no power over my nervous system anymore. You were not devastated, Valerie, I replied, my voice completely level and devoid of any warmth. You were relieved. You explicitly told me I would fail, and you banned me from a public event because my medical condition embarrassed your social circle. Do not attempt to rewrite history simply because you reverse-searched my husband's identity and saw his net worth. Martin leaned into the frame, his face turning a slight shade of red, attempting to assert his usual overbearing authority. Now listen here, Claire. Add. We made a difficult decision 4 years ago to protect the integrity of Jessica's special day. You were entirely unstable. We are family, and family forgives. You need to provide us with your current address. We want to fly up to Canada next month to meet our granddaughter and properly welcome Simon into the fold. You will not receive my address. You will not meet my daughter. And you will never speak to Simon, I stated clearly, shutting down his demand with absolute finality. You assumed my social anxiety made me stupid and helpless. It only made me quiet. I spent my entire life watching you value money and public perception above basic human decency. You cast me out when you thought I had nothing to offer your brand. You do not get to claim me now that I possess the exact status you worship. Jessica pushed her way to the front of the camera, her eyes wide with a mixture of anger and desperation. You cannot do this, Claire. I owe you absolutely nothing, Jessica. I spent my savings to stand by you at your wedding, and you threw me out like garbage. You wanted a perfect, wealthy family for your photographs. Congratulations, you have it. You do not get access to my husband or to my daughter. Valerie began to cry, actual tears spilling over her expensive makeup. You are being incredibly cruel, Claire. You cannot keep our granddaughter a secret from us forever. I am not keeping her a secret, I corrected her calmly. I am keeping her safe. She will never know what it feels like to be told her existence is an embarrassment. I did not wait for their response. I ended the call and immediately blocked their phone numbers. I placed the phone back down on the desk, stood up, and walked out of the office to join my husband and my daughter in the garden. I had delivered the final, inescapable truth to the people who raised me. They had entirely underestimated the strength required to survive in silence, and their punishment was to spend the rest of their lives completely locked out of the empire I built on the other side of the border.